11 defeated Vecna. Season 5 delivered its answer. The gate closed. The party survived. Hawkins exhaled. And everyone is calling it a victory. But here's the thing they're not talking about. You didn't win. Hawkins didn't win. And the villain you think was defeated in that finale? That was never the real villain. What if I told you that the single most dangerous entity in the entire history of Stranger Things was never fully named in the final episode, never fully explained, never fully killed, that it was operating before Vecna existed, that it could operate long after him, that every Demogorgon, every flayed human, every horror you watched across 5 seasons was just this thing clearing its throat. I want to make you a promise before we get into the ranking. By the time we reach number 1, you are going to look at every villain in this show differently. Not just the monsters, the entire mythology. A few ground rules for this ranking. We're including every major threat across all 5 seasons. We are ranking by strategic threat level, not body count, not scariness, because those are not the same thing. And we are going full Villainologist on this, which means the psychology matters as much as the power level. Before you say, obviously it's the mind flayer, I need you to hear why, because the reasoning is not what you think. Let's go. Ranking number 5, the Demogorgon. Number 5 is where we establish the baseline for everything that follows. The Demogorgon started it all, and it deserves its place in horror history. It frightened an entire generation, launched a cultural phenomenon, and permanently altered the visual language of streaming-era monsters. But here's what I find most fascinating about the Demogorgon. It is terrifying in precisely the same way a great white shark is terrifying. It doesn't plan. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't have an agenda. It is hungry. From a behavioral psychology standpoint, the Demogorgon represents what we call pure predatory conditioning. Its threat profile is entirely stimulus response. Blood triggers it. Sound attracts it. Darkness shelters it. There is no ideology beneath the surface. No grief, no ambition, no philosophy of destruction. This matters because it means it can be learned. And once you can learn a predator, you can survive it. Joyce Byers survives it with a flamethrower. Jonathan and Nancy trap it. 11 disintegrates it. A monster you can burn is a monster with limits. But here's the detail Season 1 buries so quietly you probably missed it. The Demogorgon doesn't choose who it takes. It takes whoever it can. Will Byers disappears not because he is special, not because something needed him specifically. He was simply in the wrong place when the gate opened. Contrast that with what comes later in this ranking, and you will understand why the Demogorgon, for all its horror, is the least dangerous entity in this universe. It reacts. Everything above it on this list plans. Keep that thread in mind. It's going to matter. Ranking number 4, the Flayed Army. Because we're not talking about a single creature. We're talking about a system of creatures. The demo bats, the demo spiders, the flayed humans, the flesh amalgamation that nearly completed its conversion in Hawkins in the summer of 1985. All of it answers to something higher. And what makes this tier genuinely more terrifying than the Demogorgon is the human element. When Billy Hargrove is flayed in Season 3, he doesn't become a monster that looks like Billy. He becomes a weapon, wearing Billy. Think about what that means. The entity controlling him doesn't erase Billy's memories. It doesn't overwrite his personality with something alien. It weaponizes what was already there. It uses Billy's knowledge of Max, her schedule, her friends, her emotional triggers, to construct the most effective possible trap. It uses Billy's physicality, his aggression, his capacity for intimidation as hardware. And here is the moment that crystallizes this tier's true threat level. The sauna scene. When Max confronts Billy in that sauna, what we are witnessing is not a supernatural horror sequence. We are watching a clinical case study in what I would call corrupted attachment weaponization. Billy's love for Max, complicated, fractured, incomplete, still exists in the system. The hive doesn't erase it. It uses it as camouflage. In trauma psychology, we recognize that the most effective manipulation occurs not through fear alone, but through the corruption of trust. When the person threatening you is also a person who claims to care for you, the psychological damage extends far beyond the physical moment. Max doesn't just survive Billy's possession. She carries the architecture of that betrayal for the rest of the series. And Season 4 shows us exactly how deeply that wound runs, straight to Vecna's front door. So if a system of control can do that to a single human being, what can it do to an entire population? We're just getting to the good part. Ranking number 3, Vecna. Number 3. And before you reach for the comments, hear me out. Because I want to give Vecna his full due before I tell you why he's only number 3. Henry Creel, Patient 0, 1, Vecna, is not just a great horror antagonist. He is arguably the most psychologically sophisticated villain in modern prestige television. And the argument for his placement here is not that he is weak, it's that the show itself accidentally proved something profound about him. Let's start with the undeniable fact. Henry Creel wasn't born evil. He was shaped evil. Season 4 gives us his origin, a child of hyper-attuned perception, growing up inside the polite violence of mid-century American domesticity. He watched his father gaslight his mother. He perceived the resentment and shame and quiet cruelty that ordinary suburban life performs politeness to conceal. Most children who are too sensitive are trained eventually to suppress that perception. Henry Creel weaponized it. In clinical psychology, there is a profile that researchers sometimes describe as predatory empathy, a condition in which an individual possesses exceptional sensitivity to the emotional states of others, but applies that sensitivity not to build connection, but to identify vulnerability. Henry Creel is the purest television embodiment of this profile I have encountered. He doesn't lack empathy. He is exceptional at it. He knows Max Mayfield's deepest shame. He knows the precise texture of her grief over Billy. He knows exactly which memories to replay to trap her inside an emotional loop she cannot escape. He knows that the clock sound, the specific cadence of that ticking, bypasses conscious defenses entirely and reaches the part of the brain where trauma lives. That is not supernatural. That is psychological precision. Let that land. Vecna is not hunting bodies. He is hunting wounds. And in a show populated entirely by characters who have experienced profound emotional damage, Eleven's captivity, Will's possession, Max's guilt, Hopper's grief, Joyce's isolation, Vecna exists inside an almost limitless supply. He is, in the most clinical sense, a predator perfectly adapted to his ecosystem. So why is he only number 3? Here's the answer the show embeds in Season 4 so quietly that most people drove right past it. When Henry Creel was cast into the Upside Down, broken, dying, discarded, something in that dimension received him. It didn't destroy him. It housed him, amplified him, gave him form and a kingdom and an army. And the question that I have not seen adequately addressed anywhere in this fandom: who was actually doing the choosing? Did Henry Creel master the Mind Flayer? Or did the Mind Flayer recognize in Henry Creel the most useful human interface it had ever encountered, and let him believe he was the one in control? Here is what the show confirms, if you follow the lore carefully. The Upside Down already existed before Henry arrived. The hive mind was already functioning. The Demogorgons were already deployed. Vecna contributed strategy, a human translator who could understand emotional architecture in ways the Mind Flayer apparently could not fully access on its own. He didn't create the system. He was recruited by it. And that makes him not a final boss. It makes him the most sophisticated middle manager in television history. Before we get to number 2 and number 1, and I promise you, the way we're framing number 2 is not what any other channel is doing, drop a comment right now. Do you think Vecna was using the Mind Flayer? Or was the Mind Flayer using Vecna? I read every single one. And if you're new here, this is what Villainologist does. We don't recap, we don't review, we dissect. Subscribe, because we are just getting started. Ranking number 2, the Upside Down itself. Number 2 is not a villain you've seen ranked anywhere else, and that's exactly why it belongs here. The Upside Down. Not the creatures inside it, not the gate, the dimension itself. Let me ask you something. Why does the Upside Down look exactly like Hawkins, Indiana? Same streets, same buildings, same layout, same geography. But frozen, covered in ash, draped in biological tendrils and perpetual dark. And this is the detail that most people walk past. Frozen specifically in 1983, the year the gate was first opened. Why would a multi-dimensional intelligence maintain a perfect architectural copy of a small town in Indiana? Here is the Villainologist thesis. The Upside Down is not a location. It is a digestive organ. It is what Hawkins looks like when the Mind Flayer's assimilation process reaches completion. The frozen mirror version of our world isn't a snapshot of what was. It is a preview of what was intended. The ash doesn't fall from a sky. It rises from the biological substrate of a world that was in the process of being incorporated. In evolutionary biology, there is a survival strategy known as Batesian mimicry, where a harmless organism evolves to resemble a dangerous one in order to deter predators. The inverse of this is equally well documented. Dangerous organisms that mimic the familiar in order to prevent immune response from their hosts. The Upside Down mirrors Hawkins not because the Mind Flayer is sentimental. It mirrors Hawkins because a host environment is hardest to fight when it looks like home. When Will Byers is trapped there, he recognizes every street, every tree, every porch. He cannot fully flee a place that looks exactly like where he lives. And here is the implication that Season 5 never fully addressed. If the frozen 1983 Upside Down is Hawkins in the process of being consumed, what does that mean about other versions of other towns, in other dimensions, in other worlds? We were never the first. The Mind Flayer has practiced this. The Upside Down is the evidence. Ranking number 1, the Mind Flayer. And here we are. Number 1. The entity the Duffer Brothers named, gave a face to. Complicated. And then, even in their own finale, never fully explained. The Mind Flayer. Let me stop you before you think you know what I'm about to say. When you picture the Mind Flayer, what do you see? The massive shadow spider form from Season 2? the flesh creature from Season 3, the abyss form from the Season 5 finale. Here's the thing about all of those images. None of them are the Mind Flayer. Those are its expressions, its language, its body language, in the same way that a raised fist is not the anger itself, just one expression of it. The Mind Flayer is not a creature. It is an operating system. Let me trace its strategy across 5 seasons, because when you see it laid out linearly, what emerges is not the arc of a monster. It is the arc of an intelligence. Season 1 and 2. It operates through Will Byers, not destroying him, but reading him. It sends the Demogorgon as a harvesting proxy while it studies human emotional and neurological architecture through Will's subjective experience. This is reconnaissance, passive data collection. The Mind Flayer learning what it is dealing with. Season 3. It upgrades. Rather than maintaining a single possession, it launches a parallel track assimilation protocol, biological conversion through chemical agents, flaying through psychological corruption, and physical amalgamation to build a more efficient delivery mechanism. This is iteration, the strategy adjusted based on what it learned. Season 4 and 5. Having identified its limitation, it cannot fully navigate human emotional complexity on its own. It acquires Vecna as a human interface layer. It gives him a kingdom, an army, a purpose, and through him, it dramatically expands the precision of its targeting. This is adaptation. Here's what that progression reveals. The Mind Flayer is the only villain in Stranger Things that gets better at being a villain. Vecna is devastating from the first moment we meet him. Static, complete, deployed. The Mind Flayer is iterating. Across every season, adjusting, learning, becoming more efficient. And an intelligence that learns does not have a ceiling. The final argument. What Season 5 actually left unresolved? Let me say something about Season 5 that the fandom has been circling without landing on. The finale defeated Vecna. It did not defeat the Mind Flayer. It closed a gate. Think carefully about what that means. The Mind Flayer exists in a dimension that has already demonstrated across 5 seasons that it can be accessed through psychic pathways, underground tunnels, and moments of traumatic rupture. The gate is closed. The dimension still exists. The intelligence still exists. And somewhere in the dark mirror of Hawkins, Indiana, frozen in 1983, draped in ash and biological tendrils and the quiet hum of a hive mind that has been studying human beings since the Cold War, something is still thinking, still learning, still adapting. You can't roundhouse kick a dimension. You can't burn an operating system. You can't close a gate on a consciousness that has already been inside you. The heroes won the battle. The Mind Flayer survived the war. And here is the darkest possible reading of the Stranger Things finale. The one the Duffer Brothers left just ambiguous enough to be true. Will Byers, who spent an entire season as this entity's host, who let it read his memories, feel his grief, map his emotional world from the inside, walks out of that story healed, whole. But the show never answers the question it actually raised. What if a thread of the hive still runs through him? What if the Mind Flayer didn't just read Will Byers? What if it left something behind? Some horrors are most powerful when they remain unresolved. So here is the final hierarchy, the ranking no one else is giving you. Number 5, the Demogorgon. Primal, instinctual, terrifying, killable. Number 4, the Flayed army. Insidious, adaptive, human in all the worst ways. Number 3, Vecna. Brilliant, precise, psychologically devastating. Number 2, the Upside Down. Not a location, a weapon, a preview. Number 1, the Mind Flayer. An extinction-level intelligence operating through assimilation, iteration, and the systematic erasure of individual identity across multiple dimensions and multiple decades. Vecna was terrifying because he knew your name. The Mind Flayer is terrifying because it doesn't need to. It just needs time. And somewhere in a dimension frozen in 1983, draped in ash and silence and everything Hawkins used to be, it has nothing but time. Drop a comment. Which villain left the deepest psychological mark on you, and why? I read every single one. And if you're new here, this is what Villainologist does. We go deeper. Subscribe, because we are just getting started.